Over the years, the human being has been using fossil fuel as main energy resource. Burning oil and coal has produced the greenhouse effect, due to the pollution generated by the burning of fuel. Nowadays the focus is to find an eco-friendly way of generating energy, to decrease the contamination, and counteract the use of fossil fuels. In the first part of this video we're going to review, compare and diagnose the composition of the transport energy matrix of both Chile and Brazil over the years. Both Chile and Brazil use fossil fuel derivatives as main transport energy resource, which are gasoline. Chile has 3 different types of gasoline octanes, 93, 95 and 97 octanes. The main difference is that the higher the number of octanes the combustion is better, and more efficient. Brazil uses common, additive and premium diesel, which is a fuel oil distillate. It's not as flammable as gasoline, and emits less greenhouse effect gases like carbon dioxide, methane and nitrogen oxide. Natural gas, it's considered the cleanest fossil fuel, because compared to diesel it emits 99% less sulfur oxide, 80% less nitrogen oxide and 40% less carbon dioxide. Electricity, both countries also use electricity in minimum quantities in zero-emissions vehicles. Ethanol, or alcohol, is considered a biofuel used only in Brazil. It is obtained by the process of sugarcane fermentation. It emits carbon dioxide as combustion result, and is considered carbon neutral because when sugarcane grows it absorbs the CO2, creating an offset versus the combustion-generated CO2. Evolution of the Brazilian transport energy matrix. From 2016 to 2019, liquid fossil fuel demand has been decreasing from 76.96% to almost 70%, and ethanol use it's been exponentially growing from 19.36% to almost a quarter of the total energy consumed by transport in Brazil. Natural gas and electricity are growing fast too, but in minor quantities, from being less than 3% of the total energy consumed to almost 5% combined. Evolution of the Chilean transport energy matrix. In Chile, almost the entire transport sector energy consumption is based on liquid fossil fuel. In 2016, 98.89% of the entire transport energy matrix belonged to petroleum derivatives, and the rest, 1.11%, belonged to natural gas and electricity. Over the years the liquid fossil fuel demand decreased marginally. In 2019, 98.77% of the total is still petroleum derivatives. Natural gas demand is almost non-existent, and electricity use increased just by 0.25%. In Brazil and Chile the most used fuels are oil derivatives. By these characteristics we can analyze the pollution produced by fossil fuels and the environmental impact. Carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, hydrocarbons, particulate matter and sulfur oxides are materials produced by the combustion in an internal combustion engine. These gases are toxic, and they contribute to the greenhouse effect, acid rain, and particulate matter formation. In Brazil the ethanol when produced generates sugarcane remains that are extremely toxic for the environment, and the amount of lands needed for plantation produce deforestation. Electricity in both countries is generated in great amount by renewable sources, but hydroelectrics also produce negative impacts when they are builded, creating deforestation and flooding wild fauna areas. Analysis of Chile and Brazil transport matrices. The first difference is that Brazil uses more fuel than Chile, and that's because in 2019 there were approximately 45.91 million vehicles in circulation in Brazil, versus 5.5 million vehicles in Chile. That is 9 times more cars in Brazil than in Chile. In both countries the main fuel resource is petroleum. For Brazil is 71.18% of the 2019's energy matrix, and for Chile is more than 98% of the total. Only Brazil uses biofuel known as ethanol, and it's responsible for 24.27% of the energy matrix. Natural gas in Brazil is 4.24% of the energy consumed, and in Chile it's only 0.14%. Brazil only uses 0.31% of electricity as an energy resource, versus Chile, that uses 1.09% of electricity of the transport energy matrix. In the second part of this video we are going to talk about the challenges to change the current transportation matrices of Chile and Brazil, the actions taken in each country to meet the 7th, 12th and 13th Sustainable Development Goals, the results obtained in each country and improvement actions to increase the sustainability of transportation. The biggest challenge to change the current energy matrix in both countries is mainly because of the exponential growth of the transport sector as the countries develops more roads and the population needs to move around increases. Following a global trend, MME, 2008, in Brazil the combined consumption of the industrial and transport sectors developed more than the others and in 2007 reached 65% of all energy consumption in the country. This increase is explained in the transport sector by the consolidation of road transport as the main Brazilian logistics matrix. The difficulties to implement biodiesel as an sustainable alternative for fuel in Brazil is a challenge, because although sugarcane ethanol is being considered a clean energy, the sugarcane harvesting process generates negative impacts on the soil and water sources close to the crop. Burning, which serves to facilitate harvesting, destroys most of the microorganisms present in the soil, pollutes the air and causes respiratory diseases. In Chile on the other hand, fossil fuels have been losing participation in the general energy matrix, due to a greater presence of renewable energy plants. As of September 2019, the national electric system has an installed capacity of generation of 24,856 megawatts, corresponding to more than 99% of the national total. Of the total installed capacity, 47% corresponds renewable resources energy, and 53% corresponds to fossil fuels and thermoelectrics. Incorporating electricity into the transport energy matrix of Chile in more quantity poses a greater challenge in terms of increasing demand and energy efficiency because of the need to implement more electric structure for private and public transport. Actions and results to meet SDGs in each country. In Brazil, according to Joint SDG Fund, regarding the 7th SDG, since 2016, there has been an increase of access for the population to electricity, and clean fuel, for domestic use, which has been decreasing the CO2 emissions, due to the implementation of new renewable energy sources. In Chile on the other hand there has been a few issues to meet the 7th SDG, due to the high CO2 emissions produced by the fossil fuel burning. That's why the main focus is to develop a plan to increase up to 60% the generation of electricity from renewable sources. In Brazil the struggle to find information about SDG 12 and the lack of transparency means some aspects of this target cannot be monitored. In this country there is a low awareness of the contamination waste produces, due to a lack of strategic policies that supports responsible consumption and production. In Chile for instances there are a few initiatives in order to meet some SDG 12 points by 2030, working on the specific e-waste regulation, which will include collection and recycling targets and set the guidelines for the implementation of formal collection systems. The actions taken from Brazil regarding SDG 13 have been increasing over the last years, being awarded at COP25. Changes in Brazil come primarily from civil society, because actual administration wants to dismantle existing policies, generating major setbacks to current policies. Chile has a compromise, to reduce all CO2 emissions 30% less, by 2030. In order to keep this promise there are 48 new guidelines to the adaptation of new clean energy and mitigation of pollution generated by the fossil fuel and biomass. Nowadays the best option is to continue improving the electric and hydrogen transportation available, making it more affordable. The main focus is to adapt our countries to the requirements this kind of transport needs. In order to achieve a more affordable electric transportation is fundamental to produce more clean energy, which means build more clean energy resources like solar and wind farms. It is also important to understand that electric vehicles have less autonomy than internal combustion cars. That means developing a network of charging stations all over the countries for electric transport. These actions will definitely counteract all internal combustion emissions to meet the most relevant sustainable development goals related to the transport energy matrix of both Chile and Brazil.